different?
Yeah, yeah, and then there's a flavor on it. It certainly has a lot of probably very awesome.
Oh yeah, that is connected.
And you're all open to this, right?
Yeah.
I don't know home but even free cook. And then I used to have writing and editing business.
Oh yeah.
Since I but it was it's a book wasn't
I didn't see
Yeah.
anything, so
Well, I think
it's probably should start.
my identity.
Are we ready to go then? I think we should. Yes, this is not your idea. I need a second announcement. I think we should start.
Oh, but it's already.
Yeah. That's why I think it's tough.
Oh my god, I forgot I need a speech.
Okay.
the whole thing I'm dropped all my feet.
So they should remove it.
They said they didn't have
There's also
Okay, you good?
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. Please take a seat. We're going to get started in a moment. My name is Maya Eichler, and I'm one of the editors of the book that we're launching today. I'm very grateful that we're able to gather here tonight on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We were hoping that Kathy Martin would do a welcome. She's just running a few minutes late, so she might do a welcome whenever she arrives. So we will wait for that. In the meantime, I would like to invite Angela Momorquette from Nimbus to say a few words.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thanks all of you for coming out tonight. I'm Angela Lumbercat, and I'm the nonfiction editor at Nimbus Publishing. And I had the pleasure of playing a small part in bringing this book into the world. Editors Maya Eichler, Randy Green, and Tracy Moniz collectively brought a wealth of experience to the curation of this work, and I'd like to offer a brief introduction to each of them. Maya Eichler holds the Canada Research Chair in Social Innovation and Community Engagement, and she's an Associate Professor in Political and Canadian Studies and Women's Studies at Mount St. Vincent University. She's also the Director of the Center for Social Innovation and Community Engagement in Military Affairs at the Mount. Randy Green is an Associate Professor in the English Department at Mount St. Vincent, where she teaches courses in early modern literature, including the drama of the period and contemporary Canadian drama. Tracy Moniz is an Associate Professor in the Department of Communication Studies, also at Mount St. Vincent. She teaches courses in writing, gender and media, and health communication. Collectively, these three women have come together to help create an anthology that brings forward the voices and perspectives of dozens of contributors representing populations that haven't always had the opportunity to be heard on issues of war and peace. From the moment I read the submission for this book, I was very pleased to get behind it for reasons that were both professional and personal. I grew up in a military family. My father was in the armed forces, and I lived on Canadian Forces bases across Canada. But although the military was my family's bread and butter, military culture didn't dominate our family. We were always advocates for peace and justice. Which is to say, I understand the conflicted emotions that come from growing up where tanks and artillery and guns and war games are just an everyday part of life. So I was happy to champion this book because I know how important it is to bring fresh perspectives on war and the military, especially in Atlantic Canada. And in that, these three talented editors and the book's many invaluable contributors, and many of you are here tonight, have done a fantastic job. Tonight, you'll hear not just from the editors, but from many of those contributors. So I'm going to turn it over to Maya shortly, but I'd first like to offer a word of thanks to Raya Morrison for her excellent work as the editor of the text and as the indexer of this book. Thank you so much, Raya. I'd also like to thank Jessica Linweed for allowing us to use her beautiful artwork on the cover, as you can see. And I'd also like to thank the team at Nimbus, including owners Terry Lee Bolger and Heather Bryan, and managing editor Whitney Moran. And I'd especially like to thank the Nimbus publicity team, particularly Kate Watson, who always goes above and beyond, but particularly so at this time of year. Thank you, Kate, for going again above and beyond and putting together this event. And thanks again to the library staff for hosting such an essential community event as this one. And finally, a word of thanks to the wonderful folks from Bookmark for being tonight's official bookseller. Support your independent booksellers, everyone, please. Thank you so much. And now please welcome Maya Eichler.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you for all your support throughout the process. So Kathy has joined us, my elder Kathy Martin, so I'm going to invite her up here now to offer us a welcome. Thank you, Kathy.
Hello, everybody. Wow, well, it's kind of like a bunch of friends hanging around. We're not holding signs up or anything. We're not behaving. It's very good. Welcome to the unceded territory of my ancestors and of me. And it's such a wonderful time to be here on this planet because we're able to still, 14,000 years or more, still welcome you to our territory in peace and friendship. And I'd like to sing a chant that welcomes all of us that Sarah Denny of Eskasoni taught some of us to sing. And it's represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth, of your mother, the heartbeat that we all understand. It's our first language, and when we speak the first language, we can understand one another no matter what kind of language we spoke after we arrived out of our mother's sacred water. So when we do speak from our heart, everybody should be able to understand. So I think our work is to get people all around the world to speak from their hearts. One no day, one no day, one no day, one no danali. moving along. And congratulations.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much, and thank you for keeping us on track here
And
for welcoming us. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story behind the book. But the first thing I wanted to mention is that it's very appropriate that we're meeting here today in the Halifax Central Library, because the library is such a hub for the community and brings together so many diverse communities. And therefore, the editors of the book have decided to donate all of the royalties that we get from the sales to the Halifax Public Libraries. So if you purchase the book, so the story behind the book goes back to 2014, when I first came to Halifax, first moved here to take up my position at the Mount. And at that time, I was looking to connect with colleagues and community members who also had a similar interest in war and peace, in the impact of military conflict on communities, and people who were looking for ways to advance peace in our community and beyond. And so what came out of that effort is the founding of a network. It's called the Network for Community Engaged Research on War, that is housed at the Mount, but includes colleagues from other universities and a lot of community members. Our common interest with that network is really to explore what stories of war and peace are being told in our communities, which stories are visible, but also which stories have not yet been heard or are less visible, and how war has impacted the diverse fabric of Nova Scotia communities. This led us to organize several events over the years. We had a workshop in 2016 where we first brought together diverse communities from the refugee community, veterans community, peace and artist communities. In 2017, we held a 6-week lecture series at the Goodman Library. And so the next logical step was really to collect all of these stories we had been hearing in a form that could be shared with others, which brought us to undertaking the work for this book. The work began actually in 2018. So, you know, these kinds of undertakings take several years, but we're here now and we're very pleased to be able to share this work with you now. Our goal was really to tell both the dominant military story that we hear so often in Nova Scotia when it comes to questions of war and peace, but also to go beyond that and to challenge it. And there was really 2 ways in which we wanted to challenge the dominant military story. The first is that we wanted to tell a more diverse military story itself. So we wanted to include the stories of veterans from a variety of communities, the Mi'kmaq community, the African Nova Scotian community, the Acadian community. We wanted to include the stories of contemporary veterans, of women veterans, of veterans who had survived the LGBT purge, the stories of military family members, and more. The second way in which we wanted to go beyond the dominant military narrative of war and peace was to look at the broader impact of war on communities in Nova Scotia. So, for example, to look at the impact of war on refugee communities who live in Nova Scotia today, we wanted to look at how the artist and peace communities grapple with questions of war and peace, and how their work helps to challenge the dominant narrative and to pave a way towards peace. It was important to us that these different stories stand side by side and could be all heard together. But we also wanted to show the connections between them and the threads that bring them together. So often these communities are quite separate, they're quite disconnected, they don't often get to speak with each other, and so we really wanted to bring the veteran community, the refugee community, the peace community, the artist community into dialogue and see what comes of that dialogue. The book has 8 main chapters. We have a chapter on military veterans, military families, the refugee communities, African Nova Scotians, Mi'kmaq and Acadian communities, There's a chapter on the Halifax explosion, on peace activism, and war and art. The book has 37 contributors, which is more than we even realized we had. At some point we had to count them to see how many complimentary copies we were giving away. Like 37. Wow. Okay, so we have 37 people we brought together, and they tell their stories in a variety of formats. So in the book, there's first-person narratives, there's spoken word poems, there's artwork, there's interviews. There are nice short pieces that are very accessible, and I think the variety of formats will be really interesting to the reader. So we're very honored today to have several of our contributors with us who will share their story in their own words. I hope that you will take inspiration from listening to them. I will end by saying that we see this book not as an end to a project, but as one step in an ongoing conversation about the consequences of war on our communities and in the conversation about how to move towards peace. This book, therefore, is an invitation to you all to unearth so far untold stories, to amplify the stories that have been marginalized so far, and perhaps to share your own story as well. I would like to now invite our first contributor, John Whalen, to read from his piece.
Thank you, Maya. I was told to be myself, so I think they'll give that a pass. I'm going to read from my personal experiences from a piece entitled Vagabonds Among You. As a former member of the military and a psychologist in Nova Scotia, I'm like many military people and veterans who live here. For the most part, we are transients and transplants of the province. I grew up in Newfoundland and arrived in 1977 as a 20-year-old recruit in the RCM. I came from a large Irish Catholic family with a military history beginning in World War I up to the present. I heard stories from my uncle about the British Royal Navy during World War II, and about my birthplace, Bell Island, being attacked by German U-boats during World War II. These stories and the movie scenes of Canadian corvettes and their iconic blaring action alarms were part of my earliest memories. I learned about the Halifax history as a Navy town, about the vast convoys in Bedford Basin during World War II, the history of Aldershot and the Burke, and about the devastation caused by the Halifax explosion. It was one of the first books I read about Nova Scotia. I trained at the leftover World War II facilities at Osborne Head, York Redoubt, Mill Cove, and visited the forts and forgotten gun placements at McNabb's Island, Silverwood Hill, and Point Pleasant. Beyond these military routes, however, people on the streets of Halifax, like today, had very few direct connections or awareness of the military. We learned to stick together and to be wary of civilians in our home port of Halifax, just like we did in foreign ports. We were a culture unto ourselves. I still have mixed thoughts about Halifax and about civilians. The world of business and ordinary life means that the military is somewhere in the background among average people. When it comes to service in war zones, nations have always grappled with the problem of reintegrating men and women infected by the horrors of war. And while the discipline of psychology owes its success to the study of World War II soldiers, the things we were taught did not reflect the experiences of modern-day soldiers and veterans. And during the height of the Afghanistan war, I assessed and treated hundreds of men and women devastated by the things they had seen and done in Canada's name. Canadians grew tired of Afghanistan and wanted to move on, including our politicians and military leadership. Veterans seemed to be screaming in anger and despair over what they had lost of themselves, but nobody was listening to them. We were taught that war trauma was a sign of compromised brains, but this theory missed the fact that they had no place to tell their stories, no place to call home. Many of them still have not come home. They are outsiders among their military friends, among older veterans, and within their families and within their neighborhoods. Unfortunately, I do not believe that Canadians know how to make room for their returning sons and daughters. I've learned important lessons from my military friends and veterans over the years. It is easy to be patriotic and wave flags when there's nothing on the line. It is an entirely different matter to give one's soul to that cause when it costs people everything they have. And when people realize the cost of their own inhumanity, they become strangers unto themselves and strangers to everyone else. Many of them, including myself, must accept that we are transients in the communities we end up living in. If people ask me where I'm from these days, the true answer is that I really don't know. Maybe I haven't known since leaving home as a young man. I have lived in Nova Scotia for over 40 years, raised a family here, and have people that call me friends. I move comfortably in professional and community circles, but I also can leave them easily and just move on. Vagabond. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I now invite Jessica Miller to come up.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you everyone for coming here tonight. As Maya said, my name is retired Sergeant Jessica Miller. I'm a 22-year veteran of the Canadian Forces, and I retired in 2018. I'm also the founder of the Veteran Farm Project. So just to be a good soldier, I am going to keep to Maya's firm timetable, and I'm only going to read a small portion of what I've contributed to this book. You know, military life is complicated because even when you're in a leadership position, as I was a sergeant, you're supposed to be in charge. But you know what? There's always that man who will always question you. It's a difficult one to wrap your head around. When I was practicing as a medic and treating patients, gender never played a role. But as soon as I stepped outside of that, gender absolutely hung over everything I did. There was always this balance of being not too feminine and not too masculine. You had to laugh at the guy's jokes, but not be too crude at the same time. You had to put up with it, or you weren't one of them. There's always that balance. You're always trying to find your way to fit in with whatever group of men you were with. In 2018, while I was just about to wrap up my career, I found this piece of property about 30 minutes outside of Halifax. I don't know why I bought it. I don't know why I needed to have it. And when I had those keys, I went, oh gosh, now what? It's been a lot of work, I can tell you. Through discovery, I found out that we, unfortunately, have a food insecurity problem within the veteran community. So, over the winter of 2018, when I had this derelict property, I got this idea, and that I put together a proposal. It was to provide food boxes, and that we could deliver them through the Royal Canadian Legion. Our first year was in 2019, and we were successful beyond what I ever thought we could do. We were able to support 10 families, over 60 people, with food for 3 months. This year, we did 45 families. What we do is we put together boxes with produce and grow food that we grow on the farm. We also add pantry staples like pasta and pasta sauce. We like to include a recipe so that the recipient can create a full meal. We also like to give information about sometimes some new and interesting vegetables. The boxes are then delivered weekly to Legion Command, and they are picked up by the families and the veterans or volunteers. Everything is anonymous. One day, I received an email that first year, and it was from one of our recipients. He wrote to me and said he was on the verge of suicide. And then one day he received one of our We Care packages. He said that day he realized that there were people who actually cared. But the Veteran Farm Project is also a way to support women and specifically women veterans. In my service, I experienced military sexual trauma, both at the hands of somebody I worked with and somebody who I worked with in my chain of command. In order to help myself not fall into that trap of depression, a lot of veterans do, I felt I needed to do something. First off, I couldn't find anything for me, so I thought, well, if there's nothing for me, then there must not be stuff for other women, and women who don't have anything else to do. So it just kind of got me thinking, and I thought, I know, dirt therapy. I thought we could use therapeutic horticulture and take the principles that we've learned through our own therapy sessions and through our personal experiences and translate those into real life improvements. You know, finding the grounding through having your hands in the dirt and connecting with nature, seeing the flowers, watching the plants grow, seeing the changes of the seasons, and just meeting other women. We basically heal and grow through the journey of becoming whoever and whatever we're going to be post-service here at the farm. And then the byproduct of all of that healing are the vegetables we grow. We don't share our experiences or talk about our traumas, mostly because that's what therapy is for. It's more about being able to come together as women. We provide a safe space for women whose needs just aren't being met in Nova Scotia and even in Canada. And that was one of the priorities in creating the Veteran Farm Project, was creating a safe place for women to come together and just be together. This is something I kind of take a lot of pride in, recognizing that there was a gap for women veterans and that we are now addressing it. We need to look after our female veterans better than we do, because we're not doing a really great job. Even with the large population of veterans we have in Nova Scotia, there is still that missing piece for women. If we can find a way to engage more women veterans and make them feel safe, that they actually belong, it could help improve their mental health immensely. Then in turn, through on the farm, they can get healthy with physical activity, good nutrition, and experience new crafts or projects. The power of being in nature and doing something for someone else. Now that is medicinal in a way that you just can't describe. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. We're going to move now to a contribution from the African Nova Scotian community. Can I please have Sylvia Pierce-Drummond join me?
Good evening, everyone. James, Francis, Daniel, Joseph, Patton, Alistair, Bobby, Kevin, Alan, Brian, Reet, Anastasia, Margaret, Paula, and me. The names of the children of Joseph Alexander Paris. So we children came with pride of the man we knew as Daddy. A man of faith, a community man, a dedicated husband, and a proud laborer and entrepreneur. While the battalion was always our story, it was our father who on July 25th, 1916, at the age of 17, enlisted. It was never the story we knew. Imagine a 17-year-old boy and his brother talking with animation and verb about the war while doing their chores. Perhaps working on a field, crop, or tending farm animals. They are talking about enlisting and wanting, indeed needing, to fight for their country. Maybe they later speak with their father, my grandfather, who tries to explain to them how their race would affect their dreams. Maybe their mother, my grandmother, the midwife who delivers all the babies in the area, gets involved in the conversation and tries to desperately discourage them, not wanting to lose her sons to war. Maybe their mother's plea is behind the reason for why the two young men enlist separately, weeks apart, in two separate locations. Perhaps it was in their blood, as the saying goes, this desire to support a cause for freedom. My grandfather, Charles L. Paris, was either a black loyalist or black refugee lineage, most likely black loyalists. Both groups supported the British and came to Nova Scotia seeking to build a life for themselves and their families. The drive to fight was rooted in survival. We know that generational impact can show up with trauma and a disproportionate weight of responsibility to find our own history. I am filled with questions that I would have loved to have asked Daddy, such as, what did it feel like to sail overseas? Did you see your brother, my Uncle Bill, after departing on the ship? Did you miss your parents? I was not able to ask these and many other questions for a number of reasons. The most significant reason was that this important part of Canada's history was never taught to me in public schools. We did not have easy access to the full story of the Black Battalion's role in the First World War. I think now of the conversations that I could have initiated with my father, had I had that knowledge. Daddy, today I learned in school about the number 2 construction battalion. The teacher said we should ask our families about it. Imagine what cheering that might have evoked. The other reason I never got to ask Daddy my questions is because he went home to glory on April 19, 1972, at the age of 73, when I was only 15. Prior to his passing, he was very ill and not able to communicate verbally, and this was for about 2 years. Black men faced the atrocity of racism before the war, during enlistment, and post the war. The spirit of faith, embracing hope, and importance of community have ensured we not only survive, but thrive. Representation and truth matter. One of the pictures often used to depict the number 2 construction battalion features Joseph Alexander Paris, my father. Seeing it always evokes many emotions for me, including pride, sadness, curiosity, and disappointment. Certainly, he is shown as a strapping figure in a smart uniform. He looks self-assured, a young man with purpose and resolve. I wonder what promises of adventure he had been told, or perhaps had told himself. that enticed him to join the battalion. I wish I knew more about his personal journey, about the story of the battalion, and its contribution to the freedom that resulted from the First World War. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia, for your contribution. I now invite Catherine Bailey Abedy up to the stage. She's going to read excerpts from 4 of the contributions to the refugee chapter.
So good evening, everyone. I'm here representing a group of 5 people, and I'll be sharing a little excerpt from each of my 4 colleagues' written contribution. And our chapter was focused on refugee communities. So last year, almost 90 million people were forcibly displaced because of war, persecution, or other forms of violence, and almost half of those people were children. The magnitude of the humanitarian crisis of forced migration is unprecedented. And yet the way the international community tells stories about migration related to armed conflict fails to meaningfully engage people directly affected. And that's why the voices of people who have been forcibly migrated are so important and why we wanted to include into this chapter. And quite also ironic, I should say, that I'm the one representing the chapter, having convened everyone, and I'll explain that as we go. Wasn't the intention. This chapter focuses on the experiences and the reflections of 4 individuals who were forced to flee their homes due to violence, political persecution, or war. And while their experiences are unique, they share themes of human connection, perseverance, peace building, and hope for stronger communities. The chapter begins with reflections from my colleague Amara Bangura, who's an experienced journalist who has reported on armed conflicts all over the world. Amara paints the complex picture of his own journey in Sierra Leone during the conflict, reflecting on the impacts of the war, the resilience of young people, and the leadership of the women who sacrificed greatly to protect their communities. In Amara's contribution, he says, "Living through those difficult times opened my eyes to another side of humanity that I've come to appreciate, the courage and the strength of women who took up the challenge to fix up the pieces." Amara is currently in Uruguay right now, hosting an international conference on peace and security, so certainly continuing his passion to enhance peace around the world. The second contribution comes from my longtime friend now, Noreen Hajali, who is here with us, unfortunately not feeling well. I wish you could be hearing directly from Noreen instead of me. Noreen is a lawyer, a humanitarian, a mother of 4, and maybe you can just wave, Noreen, so people can see that you're here. Thank you. So Noreen is here again with us tonight, not feeling so well, but she shares her heartfelt account of what it's like to be a mother during an armed conflict and moving through the different journeys that her family experienced. She took great lengths to seek medical treatment for 2 of her 4 children who needed extreme medical attention, very serious medical attention. Her contribution is entitled, "Don't Lose Hope, We Never Know What Tomorrow May Bring," and it really captures Noreen's faith. In her contribution, she states, "I think we should never lose hope. We never know what will happen tomorrow. When we were in Turkey and the girls were in a bad situation, I never lost my hope and was always thinking, tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow will be better. I never stopped." The next contribution is from Viana Lee, Noreen's daughter. And so Viana's also not feeling her best this evening, but here with us, so this is Viana. And like so many, and so as Maya said, we started in 2018, and so it's a little bit of a lengthy process. Viana's no longer a child, but when we started this process, she was. And it was really important for us to have a child's voice in the text, because very often when we're talking about war and peace, we neglect to think about children. So Jan's portion is a journal article, written like a journal article from her perspective as a child during the conflict in Syria. So here is what Jan shares. I stopped dreaming because I didn't see the dreams ever coming to reality. I always wanted to continue education and become a journalist. But how could I now go to university and become what I wanted to be? When this happened to Syria, I didn't think I would be able to accomplish my dreams. I threw them away as if they were a piece of old paper that had been scrambled to pieces. But I never gave up hope that Syria would become like before, full of peace. And I'm really, really proud to share that Beyond is now a student in journalism at King's College pursuing her degree. The final entry is from another colleague and friend, Marianella Fortes. Marianella is an internationally acclaimed human rights lawyer who speaks about the realities and the complexities of surviving the war in Colombia. Marianella's story illustrates the bravery of those who seek social justice in the pursuit of a world where human rights are respected for everyone. And in her contribution, she shares, "My husband and I were working in the justice system. We were first-hand witnesses to the consequences of violence, perfidy, and the evil of armed conflict. But we always pursued peace, justice, and the rule of law. We worked to make our country a civilized and democratic place to live and raise our son. We did not think that we would be forced to leave. Perhaps we were naive or reckless for dedicating our lives to defending human rights in a country where the rule of law only exists as a farce to hide abuse and corruption, but we were not the only ones." Like Amara, Marianella is in Uruguay right now leading a conference on children, peace, and security, and she continues to fight for human rights all over the world. So the contributors that I had the pleasure to work with are all longtime friends and colleagues, and they chose to write their stories in this book to share the narrative from the perspective of people who have experienced conflict, who fled their homes, and who have lots of story and lessons to share. They talk about complex experiences, compassion, and most importantly, about the importance of humanity. So thank you to Maya and Tracy and Maria for bringing all of us together. It's been an interesting process since 2014 to be around for the whole ride. And thank you all for joining this evening. Thank you, Catherine, for representing all those diverse voices this evening. We now move on to the chapter on the Halifax explosion, and I'm going to invite Barbara Lambda as well as Juanita Peters and Kathy Martin onto the stage.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you to everyone who's here this evening. My name is Barbara Launder, and I wrote the introduction to the section on the Halifax explosion, and I will read some excerpts from that shortly. But first, I'll introduce Juanita Peters and Catherine Martin. Juanita Peters is a gifted and multi-award-winning storyteller, a playwright, director, and actor who worked for many years in broadcast, radio, and television. You might know her recent work as a director with Digstown, with Studio Black, and the feature film Rebirth 837. Juanita is the executive director of the Africa Museum and has lectured at the Fountain School of Performing Arts at Dalhousie. She is Actress 2022 Woman of the Year. Catherine Martin, an elder with the Millbrook Mi'kmaq community, is an independent filmmaker, playwright, storyteller, and drummer. She held the Nancy's Chair in Women's Studies at Mount St. Vincent University from 2015 to 2017, and is currently the Director, Indigenous Community Engagement at Dalhousie University. In 2017, Catherine was appointed to the Order of Canada, and in 2021, she received the Portia White Prize from Creative Nova Scotia. So I'm going to read a little bit here from the introduction to the section about the explosion. The December 1917 explosion in Halifax Harbour is referred to as the Halifax explosion, although this belies the fact that it affected a much larger area than just the city. The collision took place in the waters of the Narrows, Quebec, in Halifax Harbour, Etobicoke, with the ensuing catastrophic detonation taking place right next to Pier 6 in the neighborhood of Richmond, on the west shore of the city's harbour. The surrounding communities and neighborhoods of the entire harbour and basin were all affected. The explosion was transformative in shaping Halifax's urban core, with areas such as Mulgrave Park, Needham Hill, the Hydrostone District, the Cogswell Interchange, Africville, and Shannon Park created or profoundly altered by the event and its aftermath. And what became of Richmond? It was effectively erased. While the area was eventually redeveloped, the neighborhood is no longer known by the same name. Indeed, erasure and absence have been part of the post-explosion legacy all along. The historical narratives of the Halifax explosion concern war and conflict, militarism and survival, just like the accounts from the First World War I battlefields of Europe. A horrendous disaster and a tragedy of grotesque proportions, it was intrinsically connected to the war and to the longer history of militarization of the Halifax Harbour and British colonization in general. The result of a relatively minor collision between two vessels, the explosion was anything but an accident. Given wartime secrecy and propagandizing by governments and the press, bureaucratic ineptitude, and the practice of transporting deadly munitions through civilian communities, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Let's pause here and remember the appearance of the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, nuclear-powered and potentially nuclear-armed, in the middle of our harbor just a month ago. The contributors to this chapter in the book focus on the 2017 centenary of the explosion as an occasion to revisit historical accounts, bring new information and perspectives forward, and to reflect on questions about commemoration and public memory. And now Juanita Peters will present her piece, My Explosion.
Thank you, everyone. A lot of power in this room. Congratulations to everybody. My explosion. My explosion was not one big bang from a ship in the harbor, you see, but a series of knock-knock-knocks from my family. A series of knock-knock-knocks from a place beyond my dreams. A series of knock-knock-knocks that I have no idea from where they came. My explosion did not include nurses, soldiers, doctors, and the like, but a sense of loneliness as we ran for our lives, a sense of loss as we left what was buried in the night. My explosion came like a rapid and destroyed all that I held dear. It came fast and furious before I could think and hear of all the warnings being sent from north to south and throughout the networks where all the help was about. It came before I knew what I had and had to lose. It came before I could pick up what I had put down. It made a mess of what grounded me. It delivered anguish, uncertainty, and pain. It delivered it far beyond that day, but throughout my life, I came to realize my explosion revealed the history I now claim. My explosion was not one big bang from a ship in the harbor, you see, but a series of knock-knock-knocks from my family. It came to remind me that we have been here long before and have endured more than the ripping of bricks and woods. We have been ripped from land and loves and lost more of what makes us whole than what can be replaced by any store or lost in any storm. They came to remind me that my ancestor, Thomas Peters, risked his life for the land my family live and thrive on today. That Rose fortune made something out of nothing, and no one could say either had it easy in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. Catherine Martin's work, Basket Maker, features lyrics by her sister Mary Louise Martin, and is grounded in her ancestors' experiences in the Mi'kmaq community of Turtle Grove, which is across the harbor in an area that we now call Tufts Cove. Many members of Catherine's family lost their lives or were injured at that place during the explosion. This disaster took place, though, after many years of struggle against oppression, including the loss of their traditional lands. Guided by her ancestors, Catherine continues to find out more about her family and the Turtle Grove community. Here's Basket Maker.
Thank you, Barb. And for the narratives in space and time for hauling me around everywhere you were going. My great-grandfather, Joe Cope, and his wife, Sarah Tracy Cope, and their 12 children lived there in Turtle Grove or Tufts Cove. Actually, they have Mi'kmaq names. Those were the real names of that area. So my great-grandmother had a whole bunch of little children, and they were in a wigwam, and their wigwam caught fire at first. That was what started, and then there was a tsunami that came back, returned after the bombs and the fire, and killed many, 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 many people, and including little Henry, my great-uncle, and my great-grandma and her 2-year-old died of injuries a couple months later, and little Frankie, my great-uncle was also burned badly and passed away a few days or weeks. I was have to look to Barb for my facts. My great-grandfather Joe Cope was a basket maker, and that's what they were doing there in the summer, and then back to Windsor Junction in the winter. And my great-uncle, James Cope, and my great-uncle, John Cope, were fighting overseas at the same time as all of that was going on, and James was killed. So, and John came back, mustard gassed, and shot in the leg. And, those stories aren't told either. They didn't have to go to war, but they got $18 a month for being there. So that was a lot times 3. My great-granddad didn't go overseas because he was blind in one eye, deaf in one ear, and he had myalgia. So what he was thinking, I don't know, but they were great hunters and trappers, and they would have been fantastic soldiers. So The Basket Maker, as Barb mentioned, was written by my sister, and it's to honor the basket makers, especially the ones in my family, and we have a very large family. Whisk, 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 whisk. Basket maker, basket maker, old woman. O keeper of time, O keeper of time,
Thank you, Catherine and Juanita. To conclude, I'd like to invite you all to mark the 105th anniversary of the explosion with Catherine and myself and many others, as we do every year, at a gathering on the shoreline near Nootka Avenue in Dartmouth this coming Tuesday, December 6th, starting at about 8:45 in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Juanita, and thank you, Kathy, for all of that. I now invite Peter Dicus up to the microphone to talk about his artwork in relation to militarization. I'm going to hand this over to you so you can advance. Does that make sense? I look forward to your slides.
I'm not quite sure of the sequence, but
You'll see them.
first of all, I'd like to say that I was invited to this project over 4 years ago, and I really did not know the scope of it, who was all in it, until the promotion came out. And I am absolutely honored and humbled to be included with the editors and the fantastic contributors and people in this room that I love, respect, and adore. So thank you for this opportunity. I have a few random shots of my artwork that I will be showing, but the main narrative is I am Peter Dicus, and the piece is Pure War and Mixed Messages. After surviving 5 years of Nazi occupation during the Second World War, my parents arrived in Canada in 1948 as Dutch immigrants, and after a few years of working as contract farmers, settled in London, Ontario, where I was born. During the war, my mother's family had harbored Jewish people who had fled the southern cities of Holland to disappear into the rural northern landscape. Spies and informants were everywhere, and punishment was cruel. If caught offering refuge to Jews, Dutch families were sent to the camps with them. My father's family, who owned a farm, created secret spaces in the barn to hide Allied aviators that fell from the sky. This was also an enormous risk. When discovered with Allied airmen on their premises, families were executed, their livestock confiscated, and the house and barn burned to the ground. With stories of rescued Allied airmen buzzing in my ears, my father and I would go to London Airport on Sunday afternoons to watch airplanes come and go. The fascination with the aircraft was always there in the household. In 1966, when I was 10 years old, I was finally able to board an aircraft for the first time as part of a family trip to the Netherlands. During that trip, I met my grandfather, who I was named after, except it was hated a case. Staying in his house on the Jonkersvaart outside of the town of De Wilp in the province of Groningen. I also saw the hidden room in the hayloft of the barn that was the secret place to harbor the Allied aviators. In 1984, living in Toronto, employed by the Art Gallery of Ontario, and also a visual artist, and, thanks to the job at the AGO, now a recreational pilot, I was obsessed with flying, and I read Pure War, an interview with French cultural theorist Paul Virilio. In it, he sketches out how the global post-secondary war and Cold War economies were on perpetual war footings that dedicated entire military industrial cultures to instant nuclear launch and speedy armed retaliation. I learned that domestic suppliers such as Ford Ford, General Motors, and Honeywell were entangled in this process, not just the dedicated military corporations such as Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Raytheon, to name a few. Following my move to the Halifax area in 1991, I began to notice the military presence around me, the naval personnel riding the bus with me, actually the sound of gunfire from the Bedford Rifle Range, and the planes overhead. Being a nerd, the Lockheed P-33 jet trainer and the Lockheed P-33 Orion surveillance aircraft that left Shearwater. You could almost set your clock on it, 10:15 in the morning, each morning to patrol the North Atlantic in search of Russian submarines. It was then that I realized that Halifax represented the pure war economy as posited by Virilio. Let's see. In the year 2000, I began to track where military suppliers were located and produced artworks that vaguely mapped them. I could see that pure war is fully on display in Halifax, but hiding in plain sight to most of my fellow citizens. It became my mission to reveal, through cultural expression, the military interests that were camouflaged in the social, political, and economic fabric of Halifax. With this work, combining a field of mundane domestic messages collected at home and at work with the ominous silhouette of an FA-18 Hornet, Mixed Messages from 2006 alludes to the pure war theories of Virilio that articulate the interweave between military interest and domestic economies. Each very banal note addressed to me, the artist, functions as a micro-narrative grounded against the silhouette of the meta-narrative of military power. Recognizing Halifax as a Canadian example of pure war environment, the camouflage pattern within the environment. I think I know by now. The camouflage pattern within the fighter plane image is a representation of the land use of the Halifax regional municipality and surrounding area. As posited by Virilio, local economies and inhabitants are always directly or indirectly interrelated with global politics and warfare. During the Second World War, my parents' lives, socially, economically, and politically, were controlled by the Nazi Wehrmacht. Although not under immediate threat of death and destruction, our contemporary lives in Halifax, when factoring in the context of pure war, are also affected socially, economically, and politically by military interests. My parents risked their lives with their acts of resistance, thus far without risk of personal injury, through research and art production that represents a quiet resistance of its own. I am able to call out the powers that be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. And now I'm going to ask Elle Jones to join us to perform the poem that's in the book.
Good evening, peace, everybody. Say peace back to me. Peace. Thank you. Very quickly before I read the poem, some context. Every year we protest outside the Westin, the Halifax Security Forum. Voice of Women has been taking a huge role in organizing that. So every year I write a poem. So this represents, I think this is the 2015 poem. There's new ones every year. I also just want to say very briefly that my family has complex histories of encounters with militarism. My grandfather was notoriously an anti-colonial activist who very famously, when he saw the soldiers marching in Trinidad, and they said they were going marching to king and country, said, "You have a king, you have a country." On the other hand, my brother served 2 tours in Afghanistan and is experiencing quite severe PTSD as a result. So just to say that these come out of very complex families. Here we go. We built this city on land we stole. Built this city, we built this city on land we stole. We built this city on Cornwallis and Britain. We built this city on colonialism. Built on Mi'kmaq land without permission. We built this city with ammunition. And now that it's risen, we build it on prisons. We're building off mental disease and addictions. No industry left, so we build on tourism. We're building a city of militarism. And off-record panels inside of the Westin by Western officials with global ambitions build with taxpayer dollars, but deny us admission. New defense minister building with McKay's traditions. We're building off rhetoric of change and transition while behind closed doors it's the same old position. We build interventions and armed expeditions. We claim bombing campaigns and human rights propositions. We build up Trudeau, build with liberalism, same military, same wars, just new government edition. We build while Indigenous women go missing. They build over bagpipes and lobster dinners, and then they go home and build nuclear winter. We built the city on capitalism. We built TPP and free trade propositions. We built Walmart to push out local competition, build cheap Chinese goods in sweatshop conditions. We built the economy, global acquisitions, send jobs offshore, unemployment decisions, used up all the coal, cut the trees, overfished, build up the North End, Africville demolition. We're building off poverty, armed forces enlistment, can't get a job so you get a commission, build up the shipyards to Irving's conditions, ships start here, we're building off wishing. Still building off Harper, although we dismissed it, we're gentrifying the projects on that $300 billion. We're building the city on military missions, building weapons and warships to use on brown children. We build off the blood of Afghans and Libyans. We're building with drone strikes on Yemen and Syrians. Collateral damage, we take out civilians, we build global war over pipeline positions. We're building the city on carbon emissions. We're building a cycle of radicalism. We tortured our extraordinary rendition. We built occupations, just change definitions. We helped to build ISIS, historical revision. We built Boko Haram to get oil from Nigerians. We built instability, build opposition. We destabilized the Mideast, societal demolition. We build arms trade with the Saudis, geopolitical divisions. We fight proxy wars by our allies' decisions. We're one of the willing. We build coalitions with U.S. and NATO and Israel politicians. We help to build settlements, walls, and partitions, build an open-air prison in Gaza for Palestinians. We're building in Africa a new colonial mission, built a security state from the war on terrorism, cyber surveillance built by government technicians. We built a spy network for the new Inquisition. We're building a world where we all are suspicious. We're building two classes of Canadian citizens. We build Islamophobia and hate crimes commission. We build off a racist immigration point system. We build off the tattoo military tradition. Lockheed Martin on campus helps bill our tuition. We say we're building new weapons to strike with precision, building new drones with facial recognition. We're building an economy on death and attrition. We're building new treaties on nuclear fission. We build NGOs and we send in tacticians. We use foreign aid to build imperialism. We build occupations and call it assistance. We build cholera, refugee camps, malnutrition. We build piles of dead bodies and decomposition. We build a new world for 9/11 fruition. We're building this world off of war repetition. The theater of war is an endless audition. We built Al-Qaeda, we're building militias, we build retaliation, a cycle so vicious. New York, Beirut, Paris, Mali, and Garissa, military strikes just further ignition. We build global war and there's no intermission. We're building ourselves out of human existence, and we're not bystanders, we're not in a mission, because don't you hear that radio transmission? Don't you remember? Take it back to the beginning. We built this city on land we stole. Built this city, we built this city on land we stole.
Hello everybody, my name is Rena Green, and as you've already heard, I'm one of the co-editors of Speaking Up. As you've also heard, in putting this collection together, our intention was to gather stories from communities that have been marginalized, unheard, or ignored, and to set them alongside better-known accounts. We wanted to invite people from a wide variety of Nova Scotian communities to tell their stories of the far-ranging and unexpected consequences of war and peace in their own voices. You've heard some of those stories here tonight, and we thank all of our contributors for having the courage to come forward and share their stories, both in the book and here. And we encourage you to now pause and reflect on how these stories connect with one another, to consider common threads, to perhaps consider that you have a story of your own. The philosopher Roland Barthes describes text as a tissue, a woven fabric, and we believe that this metaphor, with its reference to weaving, is especially apt for thinking about how the stories of war and peace in Nova Scotia are woven together into the fabric of the province, and for examining what patterns they might share. Weaving isn't limited to the creation of fabric and stories either. It is, as Catherine Martin has shown in Basket Maker, an important element in basket making, itself a vital part of Mi'kmaq culture. The weaving of baskets and stories tells us something about Mi'kmaq, Nova Scotia. It helps us to see strands and supports that we may not have seen before, to see points of touch and pressure and friction that we may have previously ignored, and to see loose and missing strands that need to be caught up and woven back into the whole.
Good evening, I'm Tracy Moses. This collection recognizes the importance of creating community through storytelling and of illuminating the common threads that weave these unique experiences and perspectives together. Common threads like the way some voices have been shut out and excluded from participating in war, from being remembered and memorialized in Canada's war story, and by being overshadowed by a dominant narrative focused on military history. Indeed, these stories illustrate how some experiences of war and peace have been excluded from Nova Scotia's history, landscape, and culture. At the same time, they remind us of how conflict here and elsewhere have shaped Nova Scotia as a place. While war has displaced, excluded, and rendered invisible certain communities, the experience of war can also bring new forms of belonging. We see this in the stories of veterans, Indigenous communities, refugees, and artists who show us how conflict can bring disparate communities together and why a sense of belonging matters. The stories in this collection are a testament to the capacity for adaptation and resilience by those immersed in military conflict and peace efforts. War brings destruction just as it calls for rebuilding, physical, social, and emotional. These stories are a testament to the strength that requires. We are grateful for all the support that helped to bring this collection to life. We thank Nimbus Publishing, especially Angela Mombercat and Kate Watson. We thank our tireless copy editor and indexer, Rhea Morrison. We thank Mount St. Vincent University and all the students who helped with the project. We thank the Halifax Central Library for hosting this book launch. We thank the contributors who courageously shared their stories through this book. And we thank all of you for coming out this evening to recognize and celebrate the contribution that this collection makes to the story of Nova Scotia and to that of Canada too. We invite you to join the conversation created within and through this book. We invite you to reflect on the patterns you see among the stories as we leave you now with a closing song by Sandy Greenberg from the Nova Scotia Voice of Women. We look forward to more discussion during the book signing to follow.
tried to put a I have my fingertips on it, but I have to take them off the internet.
Well, thank you so much. Oh yeah, turn it on. Thank you. Oh my goodness, so that was a very rich assortment of stories. And what I want to focus on is the word peace. I think that at the end of every conflict, the word peace means so much to people. And it's like, oh, peace at last. But in between, maybe when we're contemplating, fighting and trying to just live our lives, it seems to fade into the background. And when peace activists bring up the word peace, it doesn't seem to have that same weight to it. So I recently was listening to a peace activist. It was like one of those wonderful Zoom webinar things of a peace activist from, I believe it was Georgia or one of the countries around Ukraine. And he said, and there were also some activists and academics from the United States on that call. So somebody said, whenever the conflict breaks out, everybody always comes to the peace activists and says, what do we do now? And he said, well, all you can do is look for off-ramps. Because our job is to prevent war, to prevent all this suffering. So I'm going to do a couple songs. Maya had remembered that I had some songs that had something to do with our two wonderful grandmothers that led us for so many years, Muriel Duckworth and Betty Peterson. And there's a song that I wrote way back when the Labrador was being threatened by the cruise missile testing, when the Innu and Labrador were suffering from these low-level flights. And I was asked by Pat Kipping, who probably half of you know, to write a song for Voice of Women. And so I wrote a song there, and that's always been Betty Peterson's favorite song. She would always ask me to sing it. And then I'm going to just go into a song, Last Night I Had the Strangest Dream, by Ed McCurdy, who did spend the last years of his life in Halifax. And that was Muriel's favorite song, as I recall. This is a song for our mother, the earth. This is a song for all our children. We will study war no more. It's time to study peace. We'll turn our swords into plowshares, missiles into hope, hope that war will cease. We'll sing it out with our voices, we'll say it with our hearts. It's time to study peace. People of all nations make up this world. People of all nations can live together. We will study war no more. It's time to study peace. We want to tell our neighbors on this planet of Earth, want to tell our neighbors that we care about them. We will study war no more. It's time to study peace. We'll turn our swords into plowshares, missiles spend our money on education. We will study more, no more. It's time to study peace. We'll turn our swords into plowshares, missiles into hope. Hope that war will cease. We'll sing it out with our voices. We'll say it with our hearts. It's time to study peace. It's time to study peace. Last night I had the strangest dream I'd ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. I dreamed I saw a mighty room filled with humanity, and the paper they were signing said they'd always live in peace. And when the paper was all signed and a million copies made, they all joined hands and bowed their heads as grateful prayers were prayed. And the people in the streets below were dancing round and round, while swords and guns and uniforms were scattered all on the ground. Sing with me. Last night I had the strangest dream I'd ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. Thank you.
That was good. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out tonight. I'd just like to say thanks once again to our editors and all our contributors. And the editors are now available to sign your books if you'd like to purchase a book from Bookmark, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you.